Hey, everybody. Welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy.
There is a new sheriff in town, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square.
In America, we have the right of free speech. We have the right to offend, to provoke, to annoy, and to stand up for what we believe in, even if you find it controversial.
This is just a classic left-wing hypocrisy. They want to push their ideological agenda, and they want to silence and punish conservatives. It's unbelievable, and we just have to stand up and say no.
I just believe in freedom. Why are liberals so afraid of freedom and freedom of speech? I don't get outraged. You can turn off the TV, turn off a radio dial, turn off a podcast, walk out of a commencement.
Oh, turn off the TV. What a novel concept. We're going to talk about that clip and this whole Jimmy Kimmel situation in just a second. And we're excited to have our friend George Conway back on the podcast. So we'll get to George in a little while. But first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening. And we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media. And we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe. And you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. All right, so that was a bunch of Republicans, J.D. Vance, Megyn Kelly, Sean Hannity, and others. Obviously, that's not from the present tense. That's from the past, when they would lose their shit every time they thought liberals were denying us our free speech and hitting us with all this cancel culture bullshit that they didn't like. Now, of course, with the indefinite suspension of late-night talk show host and comedian Jimmy Kimmel, now apparently free speech doesn't matter to them anymore. Now they're all about cancel culture. And yeah, like Hannity said, just turn off the TV. Turn off the TV. Turn off Jimmy Kimmel. If you don't like what he has to say, turn off the TV. But now they're gloating and just drunk on this cancellation of Kimmel. And, the president himself is guilty of this.
After years and years of illegal and unconstitutional federal efforts to restrict free expression, I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America.
And his idea of bringing back free speech to America is to deny free speech. It's astounding, the hypocrisy that we're witnessing right now. That's all they ever talked about was free speech. And that we should all have the right to say whatever we want, whenever we want. Free speech, First Amendment, right? Anything is okay, except yelling fire in a crowded theater. But just expression of opinion, even if it's hate speak, even if you're a KKK member walking down the street saying, Jews will not replace us, that is protected free speech, right? Well, let's see what Attorney General Pam Bondi has to say.
There's free speech, and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society. We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech.
My position is that even hate speech should be completely and totally allowed in our country. The most disgusting speech should absolutely be protected.
And guess who that was? That was Charlie Kirk. And he was right. As far as Pam Bondi, when she says there's no place for hate speak, well, there actually is. It's called in the Constitution. And we don't have to agree with it. We don't have to like it. We can actually hate the hate speech. But what we can't do in America, which is governed by the rule of law and the Constitution, we can't deny people the right of hate speech. And this is troubling because Pam Bondi is, outside of Donald Trump, she is the top law enforcement officer in this country. She is the one who took an oath to guard and protect and defend the Constitution and the rights of all of us, including and perhaps especially the First Amendment. So she needed to be schooled on the First Amendment. And so this Kimmel situation, I don't know how you guys feel, but to me, on some level, it feels like some kind of inflection point. It's either the start of something really bad, or it is the thing that will unite us on some level. And I feel like it's the latter because of what I've been seeing. It's something that is upsetting conservatives. Now, maybe I'm living in a dream world. Maybe I'm just naive and there are no inflection points when it comes to Trump. But it does feel like we're going to start to see even more pushback on this.
I think you're correct when you talk about the hypocrisy. I mean, that's first and foremost. And frankly, if people aren't shaking in their boots right now, I don't know when they will be. Optimistic Andy, I would love for you to be right and that this will be the uniter, but I don't know.
As far as it being an inflection point, I don't think this is really new. I mean, first of all, we shouldn't be surprised by anything that Hollywood or the media does because they created blacklists in the 40s and 50s just for the same thing that we had the Committee on Un-Americanism. They started this decades ago. So we can't depend on big media of any type to support the artists that work for them. That's not new. And we've seen the biggest problem with this is the consolidation of media, because in 1990, there were 50 companies that controlled the media. Now there are 5. When you have consolidation, you have the ability for censorship much easier. So when we pass laws to consolidate media companies or allow them to make these gigantic monopolies, we shouldn't be surprised when they're going to cater to the government.
I want to play this other clip.
And what do you think Aaron Bondi's saying she's going to go after hate speech? Is that, I mean, a lot of your allies say hate speech is free speech.
This probably go after people like you because you treat me so unfairly. It's hate. You have a lot of hate in your heart. Maybe they'll come after ABC. Well, ABC paid me $16 million recently for a form of hate speech, right? Your company paid me $16 million for a form of hate speech. So maybe they'll have to go after you.
Okay, just for some context, that was Trump and ABC News White House correspondent Jonathan Karl. And listen to how Trump talked to him. We're going to come after you? Why? Because he asked him a question about free speech? What kind of shit is that? This is America. This is America. We can say whatever we want. Reporters can say whatever we want. News organizations, media corporations can say whatever they want. Unless, of course, we don't live in a democracy. But what's interesting to me is that in the immediate hours after Charlie Kirk's horrific assassination, Donald Trump blamed it on leftists before the assassin was even caught. We had no idea who he was or what his beliefs were. So are we at a point where we're actually holding a late night talk show host and comedian to a higher standard than we are the U.S. president? It's okay for the U.S. president to accuse the left, but it's not okay for a late night talk show host to accuse the right? And so we're at a point where if the government, through coercion, through fear, through intimidation, is going to stifle creativity, stifle free speech, I don't know. I mean, this is the thing that's got to unite us, folks. I mean, just look at countries all over the world. It's no fun living in a dictatorship. You have no freedom, no choice. That I have to sit here and literally explain to people in America, people who have served in the military, people who have fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers who died in battle to protect our democracy, that we have to explain what it would be like in a dictatorship, but that's where we're at. Think about this. Last week, Fox and Friends co-host Brian Kilmeade, in a discussion of the homeless problem in America, suggested that we euthanize the homeless. And then he literally said, kill them. Show me one Republican since Charlie Kirk has been assassinated, since Jimmy Kimmel said what he said. Show me one Republican who says, look, our communities should not be subjected to... Show me where they're going after Brian Kilmeade, where they're going after Fox News.
You're forgetting about Nancy Mace. Isn't she all over this? Isn't she upset and outraged by what's happening because she's such a stand-up human being?
Yeah, Nancy Mace, who said it was a tranny who had killed Charlie Kirk. This is before the assassin was even apprehended. But where's the outrage of Fox News, which gets to say whatever it wants, gets to lie, gets to gaslight, gets to intentionally use fake clips from years ago in different stories to shape a narrative? If we're truly concerned about sick things that are being said, which is what the FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr said about Jimmy Kimmel, how is there nothing on the right that upsets the FCC? Nothing on the right that upsets Donald Trump? Are liberals really the only people who are guilty of this? It's outrageous. It is truly outrageous.
If you're coming to power under the auspices of the blueprint of Project 2025, and it's so terrible that you actually have to deny that you're using Project 2025, and then you get into office and you're following every single Project 2025 outline, I think just based on what you said before, the only way people will understand and feel it is when the economy tanks.
Well, it is.
100%. I just can't reiterate that enough. I think that's what you're looking at.
That's a great point. All right, let's get to our winners and losers.
My winner, Trump, censorship, and corporate greed. My loser, freedom of speech.
My winner is New York Governor Kathy Hochul for having the good sense to endorse Mamdani. And my loser is Bob Iger, who has mastered the art of never being satisfied with as much money as he has, because he could have stopped what happened to Jimmy Kimmel. Instead, he was perfectly happy to have it happen.
I've got two losers this week. The First Amendment and free speech, and FCC Chairman Brendan Carr, because history will not be kind to him. That gets us to the weekly rant. So in the wake of Charlie Kirk's horrific assassination, right-wingers from President Donald Trump, Republican congresspeople, and those in the conservative media sphere have been yapping incessantly about how liberals are being, quote, radicalized by a nefarious left-wing cabal comprised of media, colleges and universities, and leftist organizations, whatever the fuck that means. But in none of these conversations is anyone talking about MAGA, which is the greatest example of radicalization in the history of mankind. That upwards of 80 million people, Americans, have been seduced by misinformation and disinformation, lies, bigotry, incivility, cruelty, and divisive hate speak into a far-reaching, impenetrable cult of personality. Nor do we hear from the right about how Fox News for decades has brainwashed nearly half the population, selectively filtering out real news and instead broadcasting shameless propaganda as if it is Russian state TV. We also don't hear from the right that almost half the country has had their minds co-opted by this propaganda, to the point where they have pledged undying loyalty to a president and party, even if it meant voting against their own interests. It is true that lone assassins and mass shooters may have become radicalized by things they see on television or on social media or in chat rooms in the deep, dark web, and they can come from the left or the right. But that is but a speck on an elephant's ass when compared with the radicalization of tens of millions of MAGA faithful. The truth is, Trump and his party are very, very skilled at projection. That's their tell, actually. We know they're doing something hurtful or dangerous the nanosecond they accuse Democrats of doing it. Freud would be proud. Part of the right's radicalization includes MAGA being told that they're not radicalized, but rather fighting for what's rightfully theirs. That they're defending the flag, the national anthem, the Constitution, democracy, and Trump himself. And in the past week, there's been myriad lies and mis- and disinformation being spread that most acts of political violence are being committed by those on the left. Yet studies, including those from the very conservative Cato Institute and the Department of Justice last year, a report which, by the way, the Department of Justice last week has not surprisingly taken off its website, these reports have contradicted that duplicitous claim and stated instead that these acts of political violence are mostly committed by right-wing extremists. More projection. As part of what could and should be called Operation Radicalize, Trump and his sycophants have very effectively convinced MAGA that he and they are the perpetual victims of a vast left-wing conspiracy. And that's the glue that keeps them together. But that conspiracy doesn't exist. But it does on the right. From billionaire kingmakers like the Koch brothers, to ruthless operatives including Lee Atwater, Karl Rove, and Stephen Miller, to the self-castrated Republican Congress, to the right-wing media ecosystem, to corrupted conservative Supreme Court justices, there are incredibly powerful people in this country who, for the past several decades, in an extremely well-orchestrated and calculated manner, have quite successfully manipulated the electorate to vote for them, despite getting absolutely nothing appreciable in return, except lies and betrayal. So, how and why these Americans have become radicalized is the billion-dollar question we should all be asking. All right, let's get to our friend George Conway. George is an attorney, political activist, and legal and political commentator. He is board president of the Society for the Rule of Law and a founder of the Lincoln Project. He is also a host of the Bulwark's podcast, George Conway Explains It All, to Sarah Longwell, and he is a contributing writer to The Atlantic. He previously worked as a litigator for 3 decades at the law firm of Wachtell, Lipton, Rosen Katz in New York City. George, welcome back into the back room.
Glad to be here.
So let's start with the big news that broke last night.
There's news?
Just a little bit. I really struggled this morning to make a list of things to talk about, but this one was just thrown at me last night, right. Which is ABC's indefinite suspension, whatever the fuck that means, of late night talk show host Jimmy Kimmel. So talk to me. What's going on here?
People are capitulating to a government that essentially seeks to eliminate criticism and opposition. And it's something that I had never conceived could happen in the United States. But we have a Congress that really doesn't do anything. We have people who care more about the bottom line from quarter to quarter than they do about the country. And we've seen that before with universities caving and law firms caving. And it's as though no one wants to personally bear the cost of fighting this administration when it comes to the fundamental right to criticize the government, for almost anything now. It's like everybody wants somebody else to do something about it. And that's how bad things happen. That's how we it's really, really distressing. I don't even know where to begin with it. And I mean, particularly too, I think the problem too is with, corporations, large corporations that have so many business interests, and there are so many ways for the government to punish them that the cost benefit analysis, if you just look at it purely and you put your role as a CEO or put your role as somebody who is out to profit and make money, you put all these roles ahead of your citizen, your role as citizen, and you have basically a complete failure of people to stand up for themselves. It's so fundamentally un-American. I just find it incredibly distressing, and I'm almost at a loss for words.
Yeah, but you know what's
Which is
interesting
usually not the case.
Well, it's interesting because those corporations and law firms that have stood up to Trump and taken him to court, they're undefeated. The courts are firmly behind free speech. And in this particular case, from a legal standpoint, I mean, there's no way that had ABC stood up to the administration and this gone to court, there's no way they would have lost this case because you can't strip a license, a broadcast license, because somebody broadcasts something you don't like.
Right. The government cannot punish people for expressing their views, period.
Nor can they coerce them.
They can't coerce them. They can't, it is the most fundamental principle of the First Amendment that you cannot be punished by the government, threatened by the government for exercising your right to express your views. Even if the views are wrong, even if the views are, even if it's hate speech, literally hate speech, the only thing that you can really come after people for is you can come after people for making threats, physical threats. You can come at people for making statements that can cause imminent harm to people, like yelling fire in a crowded movie theater when there is no fire. You can't do it for expressing views, no matter how repugnant you may find them to be. And it's particularly worse in this circumstance because Jimmy Kimmel did not say anything that's
right.
He said what he said was basically inarguable. You may not like it if you are a conservative. I don't call these people conservatives anymore. I don't know what they're fascists and authoritarians. Okay, they get really mad when you say that, and then they go out and say, "We will do X to you," which is exactly what the fascist and authoritarian regimes of history would have done. So I don't it's just a tremendous irony and a tremendous hypocrisy here.
Yeah.
I wish I were more coherent about it. I'm trying to organize my thoughts about it, and it's just.
Look, after
I woke up this morning. It's like everything we've said that could happen if you put people in power who act in bad faith, who don't care about the Constitution, who don't care about laws, who are only concerned about their personal betterment in terms of acquiring power and wealth, and who seek only to serve a man whose only interests is promoting his own power and glory. And this is what you get. This is where we are. And yet last night just felt like an inflection point. A friend of mine who's a prominent journalist was talking to me last night, and we've been talking for a long time about the impending crisis and the looming crisis. And this journalist, who's really a sunny, optimistic person by nature, said it's over. That it's over. If people are not willing to fight for their rights, the people who are, and these are people who are powerful,
right?
They are powerful. Disney has so much money, right? Disney has so much power. Disney could easily take on the government, and they would easily win. But it's not worth it, right? Get rid of this one show.
But is it?
In a very short term, if you look at everything in the short term, well, we're going to have to fight to maintain our license. We're going to pay legal fees, and even if we win, we may lose. But all we got to do is get rid of this one thing. The problem is it's extremely short-sighted.
Well, it's not just one
selfish.
thing. This is the second thing now, and there'll be a third. There'll be a fourth. Does ABC want Donald Trump and the FCC calling them up saying, "Hey, that sitcom that aired last night at 8 o'clock, you got to next week make sure there's no lines like that in there"? Like that's what's going to happen. I don't understand. It is short term. They don't see long term. They don't understand that it's just going to keep happening over and over and over again.
Yeah,
till they have no control over their own content.
That's
and then we're living in Hungary or Turkey or worse.
We're basically almost there.
The thing that about what Kimmel said is interesting to me because there were two parts to what he said. There was one that I didn't really agree with, which is the part that he said about, the shooter was likely in MAGA or wasn't, or that Republicans were trying to, change the narrative on that. And then the second thing was the joke about a true event, which was a reporter asked Trump, how are you handling your grief over Charlie Kirk? And like within 2 seconds, he starts talking about construction trucks.
Yeah.
And that's fun. I mean, if you want to laugh at Trump, that's funny. It's also real, right?
It's also real. Absolutely.
Right. But the thing that boggles my mind is the first part. Like, I don't agree with it, but I didn't agree when Trump came out immediately after the assassination of Charlie Kirk and said it was leftists. So are we holding our late night talk show hosts to a greater standard than we are the U.S. president? I mean, that's a bizarre place to be in right now.
Right. I mean, the traditional American view is that the remedy for speech that you disagree with or that is wrong is more speech, not suppressing the speech that you don't want to hear. And again, I mean, there's no good faith on behalf of the government, right? This is not even really about Charlie Kirk. And I think that's shown. I mean, what happened to Charlie Kirk and the fact that it was caught on video is really one of the most horrible spectacles I think we've seen in a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody deserves to die for their words, no matter how noxious those words are. But what the government is trying to do here is they're using it as a pretext. And this is a classic authoritarian move. And people are going to get mad at me for saying what I'm about to say. But the most prompt example that immediately came to mind, and I've been saying this online, I said it on another podcast, is the way the Nazis took advantage of the death of a young man in 1930 whose name was Horst Wessel. Horst Wessel was a brown shirt. He was a young member of the SA. And the Nazis had not yet acquired power. But the Weimar Republic was a very unstable place, and there was violence on the streets, more than we have here. Thank goodness we don't have that level of violence at this point. The communists had people with arms and guns, and there were street fights, and the Nazis had their own paramilitaries, and there was, sporadic violence on the streets. And what happened with this fellow Horst Wessel is that he was killed by a couple of communists, actual card-carrying communists. And it's not clear whether the motive for the killing was political. There may have been some kind of a business dispute or a dispute about paying some woman. It's very strange. But it really doesn't matter. What Goebbels saw in that killing was a way to rally his troops. They made a martyr of this kid who really, he didn't deserve to die. He had a family. I'm sure it was horrible for his family. But he was engaging in bad stuff because he was a member of the SA, but he didn't deserve to be killed for that. And they turned him into a martyr to the point that the Nazi Party anthem through the end of World War II was the Horst Wessel song. And what these authoritarian style regimes do is they thrive on division, they thrive on creating enemies, they thrive on making people feel like they personally are being attacked by a nameless, faceless enemy, and that they are at risk, and that the only way to fight back is to engage in violence. And again, leaving Charlie Kirk and his history aside, I don't think he advocated violence. I think there is truth to saying that he did things the right way in the sense that he promoted discussion on college campuses. But on the other hand, having seen a lot of the clips of what he has said, there was an incredible degree of gaslighting and race baiting and all sorts of things that were I find personally distasteful, and I find not constructive in the public dialogue, to say the least. But what they're doing to him now is they're lionizing him. They're making it to the point where you cannot even, they want to criticize people for even quoting him or paraphrasing him, and suggesting that he was something other than this noble person who extolled free speech and free discussion and was open-minded and wonderful and loved people. And it doesn't matter how good or bad he was, except that they are creating a cultish martyrdom for him that is designed to promote more division and ultimately, I fear, more violence. And we can hear it in the language that Trump uses. We need to beat the hell out of the left. We need to punch left. And again, just as they assumed that the murderer of Charlie Kirk was a leftist, now it's not clear exactly what he was. It seems like he was clearly transfixed on Kirk's attacks on trans people, and that the defendant murderer was, had a relationship with a man who was transitioning to female. And so maybe there was that personal motive there, but was it a thorough ideological thing? I don't know. But it's certainly, there is no evidence that it is some kind of a product of left-wing organization, whatever that may be. Antifa, the Democratic Socialists of America, the Democratic Party, the liberal media, I don't know. But they're creating this view that this is somehow this guy in South, this young kid who spent all his time online on Discord and who grew up in South Utah shooting a gun with MAGA parents, okay? They're portraying that somehow he was a tool of a grand conspiracy, a conspiracy that doesn't exist. And they're also using it, it's not just the martyrdom aspect of it to rally people. They're also basically asserting this, in essence, that criticism of Trump and criticism of people who support Trump is the equivalent of inciting violence against them, which is absolutely absurd, right? For example, my comparison of how Trump and Miller and others are treating the death of Kirk the way Joseph Goebbels treated the death of Horst Wessel. They're going to say, see, you're saying we're Nazis and you want to have us killed because, we had to, people had, you would want to kill Hitler and so on and so forth. I'm not saying that. That's not what I'm saying. We haven't reached the point of violent civil war or revolution or anything like that, or a Holocaust or whatnot. What we're talking about is history and analogies and comparisons to history, which we learn in order to understand current events. History doesn't repeat itself, but as the old saying goes, it rhymes. And the exact same tactics, not just with respect to the handling of this death, the manipulation of people's emotions in the wake of this death, and then a slew of so many other things: the control of law enforcement in cities, the attacks on allies, the just continual lies, the disregard of constitutional and legal provisions, the whole program of the Trump second administration is of a piece with authoritarian takeovers in countries all over the world in the past, and even in the present, as you say, Hungary. And that's the point. The point is, what's happening here, people need to be absolutely crystal clear, not only that it is not normal, and clearly what's happening is people are getting used to the abnormal. They're getting used to, it's something that psychologists call malignant normality, where the things that are just bad, that you would have considered bad at some point in the past, become normal and accepted. It's not just that, but it's just, we have to understand the danger that this is leading us to. And I don't think enough people do that. I think they're looking at things too narrowly. I'm glad to see there's a lot of defense of free speech today, but I don't really think that people are connecting it up to the overall destruction of, essentially a civil society in a democratic republic. And that's what we're seeing here. And the abandonment of constitutionalism. And what this gets us to is, we do get to a lawless state at some point. And if you want to end up in a situation where there's some kind of like a Spanish Civil War in the United States, well, we're headed down that path. And in fact, many of the people, many of the MAGA extremists you see online who have incredibly large followings, like a Tim Pool, who's been talking about civil war for a long time. They want this. People want this on the extreme right. And they are using the Kirk assassination as an attempt to get there, including people like Laura Loomer, right? Laura Loomer was critical of Charlie Kirk because she thought he wasn't, she thought he was squishy in some ways, to use the term that they like to use, that he was, soft on things. And now she's basically saying, that she deleted her tweets about that, or she certainly walked those back. And she's saying, I want Donald Trump to become the dictator that the left claims him to be. I don't claim he's a dictator yet. I claim he's getting there and wants to be one. And this is a step along the way to getting there. And
but isn't it incumbent upon Democrats to start messaging this the right way, to say to those in MAGA or moderate Republicans, like, do you really want a dictator? Because this is what happens in a dictatorship. You don't get to listen to the music you want to listen to. You don't get to laugh at the comedians you want to laugh at. You don't get to watch the movies you want to watch. You don't get to read the books you want to watch, because those choices of those freedoms of choice are taken away from you, because guess why? Because the dictator makes those choices for you. And you could you could spread that out to your health decisions, your work decisions, every decision in your life. Take a look at China, take a look at North Korea, take a look at Hungary, take a look at Turkey and every other dictatorship. Yeah. But how come Democrats aren't out there going, people, is this what you and your fathers and grandfathers suited up for, to die in battle over? To become a dictatorship?
Maybe, some Democrats might say this is unfair. But what I'm seeing in this country is just this weird disconnect between the people who want to point that out and fight back, and I don't mean that literally, I'm being careful with my words here, that they want to push back against authoritarianism, and to do that requires you to label it as such and explain it as such and put it in its context as such. But there's a disconnect between people who do that and people who are organizing in certain ways. Like I have all these friends who are bringing lawsuits that are, that have achieved some remarkable results. I don't think they're the complete answer to this, because I don't think you could have litigated, I don't think you could have enjoined the rise of fascism in Italy or Nazism in Russia, or Nazism in Germany and Putinism in Russia. But there is this weird disconnect between the political opposition, the actual party political opposition, Democrats, and the people who are doing the most to push back. And I don't understand that. That being said, I see that there are people who are saying the right things and understand what's going on here. I saw the senator from Connecticut, his name is now slipping me.
Murphy.
Murphy, yes. He did a little selfie video that he tweeted online or posted on social media, where he basically said what we are saying now, what I am saying, that we're marching down the road toward authoritarianism. And there are other Democratic senators who do that, or are doing it, but
how do they do it in a way that cuts through?
Because they're
tweeting. Chris Murphy tweeting is to me, it's like, let's have every Democratic senator have a press conference together on the steps of the Capitol and tell the American people, we are in an emergency. Our democracy is dying, and here's why, and here's what you're going to lose. Like Chris Murphy with a tweet. What the fuck does that do?
Well, but Chris Murphy. I'm praising Chris Murphy because at least he's saying the right things. The problem is there isn't and I'm agreeing with you here, because you just said more quickly than what I was about to go to, which is there's no cohesiveness to it. There is no critical mass to it. It is just that so many people, I think, in the Democratic Party just think, we'll wait for the midterms.
Right.
It's like
28, it'll be over. We'll get our guy in.
It's like, you're assuming a lot here.
Yeah.
Okay, I agree. Look, I think if if things proceeded in the normal course and we had free and fair elections in 2026, I think the Republicans would get plastered. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're seeing that in some of the people who are just not deciding not to run. I think we're actually seeing maybe some panic with Trump in the White House on this, because I think that's part of how frenetic they are, is because they know there's a clock running.
Right.
Okay, and they got to get all this, they got to do as much as they can to consolidate power in the next year or so. But that being said, it's like, okay, fine, we make it to, and also the redistricting, right? The redistricting in Texas, I think it's good that the Democrats are fighting back at the state level to counter that in other states. In Texas, it may end up backfiring. Because he's cratered. Trump and the Republicans have cratered among Hispanic voters, and the districts that have been drawn, as I understand it, I don't do the math here. I'm just listening to people who know the demographics and understand polls and understand where people are in Texas. The drawing of these districts was premised on the proposition that the Republican gains among Hispanics in 2024 would be maintained henceforth. And if it's not, I'm told, again, I don't have the computer models, and I don't have the wisdom of the demographic. I don't have a demographic map of Texas in my brain or on my desk. It could actually cause the Republicans to do worse than they would have done had they not fucked around with the districts. Okay, fine.
And to your point, here's why. The new polls that came out this morning, I believe, show that Texas Republicans on the economy, Trump went from being up 9 to like down 40. I mean, he is beyond cratering. They have jumped ship. And if we believe Carville that it's the economy, stupid, which it always seems to be,
yes,
that's devastating.
It is devastating. And it's like, okay, so from there you could draw the conclusion, that's fine. Whatever he does now, we'll just wait it out and he'll get plastered and we can fix it all later.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not going to cooperate with that plan.
That's a small little factoid.
That's a small little factoid. And we are dealing with a man who tried to launch a coup against the Constitution of the United States in 2021. We're talking about a man who only left office because he physically had to, okay? Because he understood that he would be dragged out of the office if he stayed, because he didn't have control of the system in the way that he would have needed to do to stay in power. He wanted to have that control. He wanted to get the Justice Department to support him. He wanted to get people to support him. He wanted to get the people on Capitol Hill to basically reject the electoral votes, send them back to the states so that there wouldn't be. So Joe Biden would not have been elected president by a vote by the Electoral College on January 6, 2020. But now he's taking control, or trying to take control, of policing in individual cities, including the city of Washington, D.C. And as we've seen in any number of struggles against authoritarianism in the past, control of the military and police in a capital city is absolutely crucial. I mean, whether you think of the Chilean Air Force bombing the presidential palace in Santiago in 1970, whatever, or the Operation Valkyrie in 1944, or anything else like that. If Trump had had control of policing and physical force in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021, he would have called out the National Guard, which he didn't. And guess what he would have done? He would have shut down what was going on in Capitol Hill. Those troops would have joined the mob that he sent up there. All right? So why are we assuming that A, we're going to have free and fair elections, and B, if we have free and fair elections and the Republicans get plastered, Trump's not going to try to do something to prevent that a Democratic majority in Congress or one house or the other from taking office? Or three, even if a Democratic majority in Congress in both houses is established, what makes us think he's going to pay any attention to it instead of basically declaring them irrelevant under Article 2 of the Constitution? Right? He's not going, he's first of all, he's going to do everything in his power to prevent the term of the House, because he knows that once you get 218 Democratic votes, he's going to get impeached. And there has been no president in our lifetime, and probably ever. I mean, you could draft a bill, a bill of impeachment that would make the length of the bill of impeachment against Andrew Johnson look like a pocket part, a little thing you could put in your pocket. He has committed so many, I think, high crimes and misdemeanors within the meaning of the Constitution. And he's doing it every day. And it was just rampant corruption. It's the use of military.
You know what? And this is the problem I have with Democrats, because you are 100% right. But let's say we have a midterm, Republicans get trounced. We have a 28 election, a Democrat wins. If this was Vegas and I said, where would you put your money? On Democrats impeaching him, or going, you know what? Let's let bygones be bygones. Let's be above the fray and not look in the rearview mirror, right? That's what they would probably do, especially after what we've been through. But it's that mentality that they're also demonstrating today. It's like the house is on fire, democracy's dying, but let's not actually act like the house is on fire and democracy is dying. Let's act like we're running against Ronald Reagan in 1980. That's what I see them doing. Once in a while, somebody shines through, a Cory Booker, somebody else, Bennett out in Colorado. People who have fire in the belly, people who are angry, who are saying it's going to be over soon if we don't fight. The rest of them are like, it's like Chuck Schumer with his like strongly worded letters, like that's how we're fighting this thing.
Yeah. And I thoroughly agree with that. I mean, there's just so many individuals who have been fighting in different ways, expressing opposition to the government, among the Democrats that I like. But again, there's no cohesiveness. There is no unity. I mean, part of the problem is, we have this system in the United States where there is really no party leader for the opposition. We have legislative leaders, but there is really no party leader to the opposition until a party has a convention. The out of power party has a convention a few weeks before a presidential election. So that's part of it. And part of it is just the temperament of the Democrats. They don't have that instinct of basically, they're not, a lot of them just aren't fearless enough. And
they don't instill fear. Like at the hearing this week, when Cory Booker was questioning Kash Patel, the look on his face is like, you want to be like, ooh, I don't want to mess with this guy. Yet most of them, when they start talking, these senators, Blumenthal, whoever, it's like Kash Patel goes, and like you can just blow them over. And so, where's the fight?
Well, it's non-existent because A, they have the power of the federal government on their side, and B, if you ever had done that 30 years ago, where let's say you were, I don't know, let's just say you were a FBI director for Reagan or George W. Bush, and Howard Metzenbaum or whoever would have been on the Judiciary Committee back then, asked some really, really obnoxious question. Even an asshole like Howard Metzenbaum, right? And you mouthed off at him and treated Metzenbaum, who they all hate. They mostly, even the Democrats didn't like him, as I recall, right? If you had treated him with the kind of disrespect that Kash Patel was treating members of the United States Senate at the hearing this week, Republicans would have gotten upset because their view is, okay, I may not like that my senator across the aisle there, but this is a question of respect for our institution, the Senate of the United States, the Congress of the United States. And there's none of that anymore.
Right.
And that's,
they're all in the same cult.
All right. They were, so we have this sort of weakness. First of all, it's basically just moral corruption on the part of Republicans. They are no longer willing to stand up for themselves. They're no longer willing to stand up for the Constitution. They're no longer willing to stand up for the institutions to which they were elected, which the framers, the Congress of the United States, the framers considered to be the most important, actually the most dangerous branch. They're completely ineffectual. Their view is we just rubber stamp what Trump says, and we can't criticize him. And no matter what disrespect somebody shows the institution to which they were elected, it doesn't matter to them. It's just, well, I mean, and these people say, why do you want, I don't understand, why do these people want to become congressmen and senators? If there's nothing, they just want the jobs? What is it that they would lose their jobs for? What is it that they would say, as a matter of principle, I will risk my job and force, I have to go back to actually work in the private sector or something, right? What is it? What is it that they will stand up for? And at this point, given where we are, the answer is clearly nothing.
Yeah. Look, I have a lot of people on this podcast who are running for Congress, running for Senate. And that's one of the questions I always ask them. It's like, why on earth would you want to wade into this cesspool? And I get a range of answers. There are still people who believe in the Constitution and our democracy.
God bless them.
Yeah, and they think they can make a difference. And,
God bless them. Example of Jeff
absolutely.
Duncan in Georgia. I mean, he's I guess he switched parties. He's this man.
He's amazing.
He's amazing. He's doing it for the right reasons.
And maybe that's the answer. Maybe it's just a slow haul, but the more Jeff Duncans in this world, Mallory McMorrows, the more righteous people on both sides of the aisle, maybe we're not going to see much of a difference in a year or two, but maybe it is the thing that will save democracy. I just want to ask you, because I'm not a very biblical man, but when you think about David and Goliath, it makes you wonder that maybe not today, but ultimately, like, who actually is David and who's Goliath? Is it Trump, the Goliath, or is it really we, the American people, the Constitution, democracy, that ultimately is going to be the victor, because it is the bigger, the stronger, the more mighty thing in this country? And that even when it looks terrible, looks bad, and we're frustrated and we're angry, we're depressed, watching what Trump does in his autocratic march, that we have to stay focused and that we are the Goliath, not him. We are.
I absolutely agree and think that that's where we want to be. But right now, everybody is kind of siloed. Everybody's looking at someone else, whether it be the corporate chieftains who are caving to the FCC, or members, Democratic elected officials. Everybody is looking for someone else to do something. In that sense,
but should we take a lot of solace in the people like Jeff Duncan, who
we should?
Maybe they know something we don't, which is, no, this fight is far from over. And they want to get in it. They want to get in that trench, and they want to fight. And that's very inspirational.
It is inspirational, but I right now we don't see people being inspired the way we need them to be inspired. Right. Now, maybe it's going to take
greater numbers for sure.
Right. Maybe it's going to take some further crisis. I don't know what that crisis would be. Maybe it's all the Jimmy Kimmel fans in the world are going to say, "What?" And they're going to start fighting back. I don't know. I don't know what it is going to take. It has not happened yet, and much to my shock. I mean, I'm a retired lawyer. I should be just playing these guitars, right? I really would be. It really would make me happy. I don't. Look. It turns out I have more fun talking and yapping and podcasts and TV than I ever thought I would, but it wasn't my intent to do that. I thought naively in 2019, when I went off the reservation, I thought that, look, it's like, if I can do it, people are going to say, yeah, I can do that too. And because I know there were so many lawyers, conservative, libertarian type lawyers, who were concerned about the direction that things were going. Because people would come up to me at like a Federalist Society conference and say, "Thank you for speaking out." And I thought that's okay. You just have to show them that, and people will follow. And I also thought at some point people are going to say, "Ah, basta, this guy's too much. What is he doing?" And it went the other way. I thought that's like, to me, Trump was always the nails on the chalkboard, because it was offensive. The sound of him, the sound of what the substance of what he does was effectively, to my ears and to my intellect, like the sound. It's this intolerable scraping of the Constitution, of truth and of justice and everything's like, I can't. Right?
It's funny you say that, because recently I've said that listening to Trump is like listening to a combination of nails on a chalkboard, a screaming cat in heat, and a toddler who won't stop whining. Put all that together, that's what we're having to listen to every
And what
single
happened was people put on earplugs, or they got used to it, or they started going, no, 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 no. That's what they.
Well, let me ask you this about something you said earlier when we were talking about the Jimmy Kimmel thing, because I think this is really the most important thing we should be looking at right now. And that is, you questioned if we are now at an inflection point. You know, we saw before the election last year that Republicans were just aghast at attacks on free speech, aghast at cancel culture. I mean, like, that and Epstein are the two things that seem to drive them the most. It's the air that they breathe, the blood that runs through their veins. Now we're seeing this massive attack on free speech, all the things that supposedly they love, they fought for. That's why they elected him.
Themselves, not for the
but
people.
But we're also now seeing this interesting mix of condemnation coming from people like Tucker Carlson and
the Wall Street Journal
others.
editorial pages.
Exactly. Like, is this going too far to people that we need in this country? Moderate Republicans, independents, maybe even some of MAGA. Is this the thing that makes them go, wait a second? No, this is not what I voted for. I wonder if you're raising something that's really important.
I wish that to be the case. I hope you're right. It would be great if it were. But I think the fundamental problem is that too many people are willing to look at things in a one-sided, narcissistic way. That when my rights are violated, if my First Amendment rights are violated, if I am silenced or canceled, whatever that means. I mean, they kind of go too far that because it's not just about the government, but that's bad. So we need to do exactly to the other side what they are trying to do to me. And it's just this very narcissistic, like, the rules apply to protect me and against them, but not the other way around. And that is sort of the essence of Trumpism, because it's the essence of Trump. The rules don't apply to him. The rules are to be manipulated and to apply to everyone else. So yeah, I mean, Tucker Carlson, it's like, okay, well, I'll take Tucker Carlson. And I'll take the Wall Street Journal editorial page. The Wall Street Journal editorial page actually is a thinking editorial page. They just sometimes kid themselves into thinking that Trump isn't as bad or that the Democrats are worse. But let's set that aside. But look at Brendan Carr. Okay, Brendan Carr is celebrating the fact that he was able to threaten major media outlets into changing their programming, because he could threaten them with regulatory sanctions illegally, but let's set that aside. And yet, I was watching television this morning and somebody played a super clip of all the times that Brendan Carr, in social media or in public video statements, said, you know, we have to defend free speech.
Yeah, and who else said that? And who else tweeted that and said that all the time? Charlie Kirk.
Charlie Kirk.
Now, how do you think his fans, his followers, what are they thinking right now? And they're like, wait a second, we love that guy because of all that stuff he said, and now we're watching.
See, but you know, I mean, I'd like to think that that's how they think.
Some of them, hopefully.
Some of them might be, but they also
they don't call me optimistic Andy for nothing.
Yeah, I've been hanging around with pessimistic people like J.V. Last at the Bulwark. They view it as the other side is the enemy, a lot of them. And that trumps, so to speak, everything else in principle. And it's sort of interesting. Somebody tweeted out the other day, there was a psychologist, I think his name was Kohlberg, who basically created some kind of a hierarchy of moral development. And it first starts off with, it's all about me, 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 me. And then the second is, I'm avoiding punishment. And then it goes to, oh, I'm gonna be a good boy because people will be nice to me. It's a question of how you internalize rules to be respectful of other people. And it takes a few steps to get to the top where you've matured enough emotionally and psychologically and intellectually that you act on principle. And principle meaning what applies to them applies to you. And that's ultimately an expression of empathy, because you have to understand that what happens to that other person could happen to you. So you want to live, I mean, you know, it's kind of like Rawls. You want to know the system that's best is the one that if you were born as the least fortunate person, you'd be okay with the system. It's this, people don't think that way. Too many people don't think that way. We have lost the capacity, many of us, particularly young people who, you know, I mean, who are lesser educated, to think of principles in the abstract and how they can be applied to different people in different contexts fairly. And that's critical when it comes to free speech. I protect Charlie Kirk's right to be a race baiter because I don't want Donald Trump to be able to suppress my speech.
Right. It's
but
really simple,
that requires a level of moral and intellectual thinking that not enough people in this country have anymore.
Well, that's the key right there. I always say that, given how our elections these days are won and lost on the margins, we only need a few people to recognize what you just said. And then the game changes.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, and that's also a point. It's like, yeah, that's actually a very, very important point. But again, I mean, bad things have happened in other societies where the bad people didn't have a majority. The Nazis never achieved an electoral majority. Two elections, the second election they had after they took power, the election was an election where they took power. They had, I don't know, 35, 40% of the vote. And, you know, Hitler was asked to form a government. There was an election a few months after that. They did worse, but it didn't matter. They outlawed the opposition.
Yeah. George, always a pleasure. Always insightful. Come back again soon.
Always. Thank you.
Take care. This episode was produced and edited by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-produced by Matty Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud for Radio Free Rhiniecliff, with additional editing by Matty Rosenberg, music by Andrew Hollander, and graphic design by Cricket Lengyel. And with a special thanks to our sponsor, The Epicurean. Again, thanks for listening. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to the Backroom with Andy Ostroy YouTube channel, where you can watch full videos of our interviews. See you next time.